here in time to allow for a launch today. We go ahead and today's launch attempt, launch control. Go ahead and end the launch auto sequence and proceed into the launch abort auto sequence, please.
Launch abort has started.
And Drex, unfortunately, we are not going to launch today. You are go for 5.100 launch scrub.
5.100. It was a good effort by the teams, and we understand, and we'll meet you there.
Copy.
We've heard the call from the crew. They have been informed. Launch Director Mike Taylor has called a scrub for the day, and we got the feedback when the Dragon team informed Bob and Doug. They said we gave it a good try, and we are here to try another day. So right now we did officially hold the clock. It looks like at T-minus 16 minutes seconds. The launch automatic sequence that controls the Falcon 9, the loading of propellants, the cycling of valves, is also stopped. We now proceed into what is a normal scrub sequence for us. We practice this every launch. So now we move into cycling the propellants, the pressurization gases back off the first and second stages. As things get into a safe configuration, then we'll disarm the escape system on Dragon, and we'll bring the crew access arm back around the spacecraft. So right now, we go just inside 17 minutes. The hardware was working very well on both Dragon and spacecraft. The fuel loading going on, we had liquid oxygen loading going on, everything but second stage. And the weather just needed a little bit more to conditions. We didn't have that time because we had an instantaneous window. And so with that, SpaceX launch director had to come with
Dragon,
had to call a scrub for the day per the safety rules that we have for this flight. So right now the team is under post-scrub operations on both Dragon as well as Falcon 9, working with the range. No issues being we start to go through that sequence. Everything looks good. And Dan, we had a good webcast going here until the very end. So you know, we'll look at it as now we've had another great dry rehearsal. Last Saturday we did a dry one. I should wet dress rehearsal, but sorry we just couldn't get there, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, John I. And obviously, we can't control the weather. We came right down to the wire there, hoping we could just squeeze in between those cloud systems to get a launch today, but it wasn't to be. But it doesn't mean we're done. We're going to have another attempt coming up in just 3 days, so we're going to be doing this all over again, essentially, on Saturday, on the 30th, and that launch attempt is going to be coming at 3:22 p.m. Eastern time, so a little bit earlier in the day. It's going to look largely the same to everything that we saw today, with the crew waking up, going through suit up, making their way to the pad. So we're going to feel a lot of deja vu, I think, on Saturday.
Yep. But still exciting. Safety is always first, so if weather was not there for us today, hopefully Saturday it will be there for us, and we will have a safe launch on Saturday.
Yeah, the initial weather report still had us at about, I think, a 40% possibility of violation. So weather a little bit better, but we're still going to be kind of rolling the dice. It is Florida in the spring and summer, so storms are always a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
One of the good things, though, the vehicle appeared to be in great health throughout the day, both Dragon and Falcon 9, so we didn't have to scrub for any technical issue. We're going to continue and follow along with Bob and Doug until they're out of that capsule, as again, they had started loading fuel onto the Falcon 9 rocket, so they'll have to wait until all that fuel comes off. They'll disarm the launch escape system, which still stays armed because they're still sitting on a partially loaded rocket, and then once they're able to disarm that launch escape system, the crew arm will swing back out. They'll make their way once again back the way they came, and then it'll be back to crew quarters for Bob and Doug for a few more days. But if you're just now tuning in, wondering why we're not still counting down, we did have a launch scrub today. We were just a little under
Stage 1
17
LOX
minutes.
and fuel flow rates are nominal for offload. Expecting about a 40-minute offload time.
And so that call out the LOX, the liquid oxygen fuel pumping first stage of the Falcon 9, everything looking good with that. Expecting about 40 minutes for all that fuel to come off. So again, once that fuel comes off, Bob and Doug will be able to launch escape system, and that crew access arm will swing back out. They'll be able to make their way back down and then over to crew quarters. So unfortunate scrub today because of weather. That was the one thing we were tracking from the moment we started today, watching Bob and Doug get suited up for their launch. We did abort today's launch, or scrub today's launch, with a little under 17 minutes to go until our T3. So that's going to move us to our next attempt, which is coming up on Saturday, and that time is going to be 3:22 p.m. Eastern time, so a little bit earlier in the day for Bob and Doug and for everybody else watching around the world. They're still going to have a 19-hour flight to station if that's when we launch, and a lot of the stuff that we saw today is going to look very similar, but we're just going to have to try again, cross our fingers, hope for a little bit better weather the next time.
And again, this goes with every launch. We do track everything all the way down to T0 to make sure that everything is go, making sure that the range is go, weather is go. So this is standard procedure. We always tend to make sure that we have a backup day, launch day, in case we do have scrubs like today. So this is pretty normal and standard. Nothing to be worried about. Again, we do this for the safety of our vehicles, as well as today we had astronauts on our vehicle. So even bigger reason for us to make sure that we have safe weather for them to fly.
And just a reminder for everyone still tuned in, it takes about 40 minutes for all of this propellant to come off of the Falcon 9. And while it is offloading, that launch escape system on Dragon, which is designed to pull the capsule away if there's any issue with the rocket or anything on the pad, that is still armed. So we're going to continue to stay with this until all the propellant's off, and then we'll see the launch escape system get disarmed. Bob and Doug will be able to open up their visors again. The crew access arm will swing back out and link up with Dragon, and they'll make their way off and then down the tower at the pad. But if you're just now tuning in, no launch today. We did have to scrub because of weather. We're going to be moving to our second attempt on Saturday, just a little bit earlier in the afternoon. Just going to continue to stand by as this propellant comes off. We heard a call that everything was going nominally or as expected so far. And then once all the propellant's off, we should see Bob and Doug make their way out of Dragon shortly after.
And what you're seeing on your screen is a live view of Bob and Doug on the right side inside of Dragon as they're waiting for propellant to be removed from the vehicle so that it is safe for them to disarm the launch escape system. And this will take a bit of time, so we are going to stay live with you to watch this as they exit the vehicle and come down from standing down on launch today.
We had a really clean countdown, weren't tracking any issues with Falcon 9 or the Dragon spacecraft, so always a good thing to see. We did have to scrub. To be a little bit more specific, we were still in violation of one of the weather criterias. It was the strength of electric fields in the atmosphere. 45th Space Wing and other weather operators are monitoring around the launch pad, and that's one of those rules where we need a certain amount of time. In this case,
nominal, roughly 50% on stage 1 LOX and fuel, 85% on stage 2 fuel.
So the propellant offload on Falcon 9 well, but we needed a little bit more time if we were going to be able to clear that launch weather constraint. And since we do have an instantaneous launch window today, we weren't able to make it. So we hope for better weather coming up on Saturday, where again our next launch attempt is going to be at 3:22 p.m. Eastern time. And through everything, I mean, we saw them get suited up. They had a great ride out to the pad. All of their initial checks on both the suits with pressure checks and communication checks went well. To get the Dragon hatch closed, the launch escape system arm, and Falcon 9 started its fueling, just not able to make a good weather window today.
And as Joe earlier, it was just another great rehearsal today. I don't think you can get enough practice doing this. So
Requirements in place, not only around the pad, but in the case of this launch today, we were also looking at whether the entire ascent corridor, as we call it, so basically the entire way that they were flying up the east coast of the United States in this launch today, we're monitoring that weather because those are areas that if they have an ascent Dragon firing off of the Falcon 9 while they're flying into space, we have to make sure that conditions are good in the sea states around those areas, just so in the middle of a hurricane, which we did have a tropical storm forming right off the coast of South Carolina today, just to help complicate things a little.
And people might be asking, if we knew the weather was going to be a little iffy today, why continue to count down? Well, that is the reason why the way to count down. In Florida, the weather is, pretty sporadic. Sometimes a thunderstorm or hurricane will pass, it's gone, and we could have clear skies for a safe launch. So we continued as scheduled, procedure again to just continue to monitor weather all the way down to the last minutes of the count. And today, unfortunately, we did scrub for weather, but we will attempt again this Saturday on May 30th.
And Dan, Jesse, a couple of things to add on there. Right now, 11 minutes after the scrub was called, liquid oxygen and fuel are coming off of the first stage. Hard to tell from misty around the tank because there's locks on board, but we're between half and a third of each of the fuel and LOX tanks filled on the first. Propellant coming out right per plan. The second stage fuel tank is offloading. That's going slower, but it's also a smaller tank to either load it or to offload it. The other thing that we're working on is the high pressure helium spheres as well as the nitrogen spheres for the landing leg system. The pressure will be brought down on those, and it down low enough to where people can re-enter the pad area. So right now the team is preparing, once they get a permission, the SpaceX ingress-egress technician team will come back inside the car around the pad, make their way up when conditions are right, open up the hatch and assist the astronauts out of the Dragon. I'd like to point that for those who are wondering whether or not, having gone through this, putting propellant, pressurization gases on, getting fairly close to launch, whether that has done anything to wear out the Falcon 9 or the Dragon, the answer is no. If you can recall, the Falcon 9's designed for at least 10 flights, and about time we get up to a 10th flight, we'll be doing testing to find that we probably got enough margin to keep flying. So this is the very first flight of a new first stage and a new second stage. So we haven't even gotten through the first flight. And in all of our margin calculations, we also take into account the fact that we may scrub a launch. So even today's operation, where we have pressurized and we have stressed the vehicle a little bit, that's taken into account in our design and our qualification testing. The other good thing is that the most stressing part of the flight for the Falcon 9 on the first stage is the re-entry. So we didn't even get through that. So we're sitting here on the pad. It's a fairly straightforward situation and not stressing on the Falcon 9. And on the Dragon spacecraft, with the human rating factors to carry crew, there is enough factors of safety, margins of safety, redundancy, that just having 2 people on board and closing the hatch and even pressurizing the propellant system does not eat into the margins of the
Offloads
vehicle.
continue nominally 30% on stage 1
So
launch,
right now
35%
everything's continuing to
stage 1
offload.
fuel.
The automatic sequences that we use routinely, both at the launch sites, Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral, even Vandenberg Air Force Base, as well as in our Texas test site for first and second stage. Those sequences are running. Propellant is coming off of the vehicle per plan. And we see Bob and Doug up in the Dragon spacecraft just waiting when we can get up there, open the hatch, and help them egress and come on back down the tower. And the other thought I had, Dan and Jesse, is right now we are coming up T0, and I'm wondering 10 minutes from now whether the weather officer would turn around and say, yes, it turned good. You just didn't have a long enough window. We only had 1 second and we needed 10 minutes. So we'll have to ask offline and say, hey, did the weather conditions improve? And one thing I'll tag on to that Dan was mentioning and Jesse was talking about, the launch opportunities. The launch window does move earlier on Saturday a little bit. So it just happened to be Orbital Dynamics said, if you want to go to the International Space Station and you want to launch northeast, which is the approved to go 33:35 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. You pick another day, the T0 moves. It's just luck of the draw. We might lightning, or we could have been doing it a few hours from now when conditions may have been acceptable. So in the end, we can all look at Isaac Newton and Johannes Kepler for orbital dynamics telling us when do we launch, us right in the middle of a period of bad weather. So there's my science lesson for today, Dan and Jesse.
Appreciate that, John. That helps soften the blow of past that T-0 time. But for anybody, if you're just now tuning in, wondering why Falcon 9 is still sitting there on the pad as we move past that T0, we for weather today, just not able to clear all of those constraints. We keep a very close eye on the weather around the pad and their whole way
Dragon
uphill.
SpaceX.
Right now, Bob and Doug are still
SpaceX
inside of
Dragon.
Dragon.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you some more words on the scrub rationale. Yeah, so we basically scrubbed due to 3 rules that we were violating. All 3 would have been expected to clear 10 minutes out. And those 3 were natural lightning, the fuel mills, and the attached anvil.
See some raindrops on the windows, and just figured that whatever the launch pad at the time we needed it not to be. So we appreciate that and understand that everybody's probably ready today, and we appreciate that. And the ship was great, and we'll do it again, I think, on Saturday.
Copy all, and yeah, we concur. And appreciate your resilience sitting there in the vehicle for us.
We got the easy job on a new spaceship.
Copy that.
All right, some great words from Bob and Doug. They're feeling good inside Dragon. They'll be ready to go when we make our next attempt on Saturday. Right now, we're just still waiting for all of the fuel rocket. After
Stage
that,
1 LOX and fuel roughly 20%, and Stage 2 fuel 36%.
and so that call right there, we're still on fuel, RP1, and LOX, liquid oxygen on the first stage, and then at about 26% on RP1 on that second stage. So again, it takes about 40 until all that fuel's off, and then the crew will get the go to disarm the launch escape system. We'll see that crew access arm swing back into place, and they can begin to egress or get spacecraft.
And you heard it live, that weather update of what we were just 10 minutes off, unfortunately, but again, today was an instantaneous launch. And as John explained, the orbital mechanics and making sure that at the time we launch, it will allow us to get to the space station on time. And so you can see on your right screen, Bob and Doug are patiently waiting. They do still have their visors on and still strapped seats. The launch escape system is still armed right now as we are offloading fuel and will not disarm until offload is complete, and this is just to ensure the safety of Bob and Doug and make sure that they can egress safely.
And just a reminder, today, just this first attempt back here, looking like on Saturday for attempt number 2. Launch America is not going anywhere. still on the track to get Bob and Doug, get this crew. Probably rather scrub for weather than an issue on either Falcon 9 or Dragon, and we weren't tracking any issues with the flight systems throughout our countdown today. Everything passed with leak checks on the hatches and the crew suits. All the communications working great. All the teams were ready to go. So, as John and I said, always nice to have a little bit more practice, and we'll be right back at it on Saturday.
What would this launch be if it wasn't even more exciting to try and launch today, and now we have to push it to Saturday?
Really got to build the suspense.
Yes. So.
Hey, Dan and Jesse. Another thought crossed my mind while I'm watching the diagram here showing fuel off. First and second stage, we're down under 10%. LOX is also just about off of first stage.
10%.
Yep, we're getting the announcement. Stage 2 fuels at 20%. Stage 1 LOX is under 10%. So just continuing to come off of the vehicle as expected. On the monitor, Bob and Doug continue with visors down. Their launch escape system is armed, as we've mentioned. If there is anything that were happening to go wrong right now, they still have the viable pad abort means, something that we demonstrated way back in 2015 on one of these webcasts when we fired the Dragon capsule using the 8 Super Dracos off of the launch pad, and it splashed down offshore in the Atlantic Ocean. So they're staying there with the system armed until all the hazards are essentially removed and we bring the crew access arm around them. We're standing by a minute. We're going to listen to Launch Director talking to the weather officer.
If you're just now tuning in, we did not launch today. We did have a scrub because of weather, but as we were saying, we are looking forward to trying this again on Saturday. Our launch time on Saturday will be another instantaneous window, so we'll have to have the weather cooperate again, and that launch time will be at 3:22 p.m. Eastern. I think our last weather update put us at about 40% probability of violation. John, I can check me real quick.
Yeah, Dan, what I saw coming out of the Air Force was 40% probability of violation, I believe. It's always tough because they report in terms of violation, and the optimists have to subtract that from 100% to 60% chance. I'll plan my picnic. We were listening, the SpaceX launch director, Mike Taylor, was talking to the launch weather officer asking about the 3 criteria that scrubbed us today. It sounds like in another minute or two, the Lightning and the attached anvil cloud rules will clear. The field mill rule, charge in the atmosphere, is still bouncing around, and so, hey, we may need several more minutes before that one would clear. So we'd need even longer than 10 minutes in the window today, it looks like, for all the rules to clear. That brings up what I wanted to do a while ago. I got lost listening to the weather brief. But there are a lot of folks who are going, why an instantaneous launch window for Falcon 9 and Dread? Now, there may be enough performance in the rocket to launch somewhere in a 5-minute period, but you've got to pick a time in there. But in the case of Falcon 9, once we start propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes, it doesn't matter so much if you can move 5 or 10 minutes left or right, because the whole sequence is scripted. We do the flight analysis assuming that the temperatures of the propeller are below a certain amount so that we know how much performance is available to the rocket, how much margin we're going to have. So essentially, if you start the countdown, 4 hours, 8 hours out like we were doing today, and you have a very short window, once you get into propellant loading at T-minus 35 minutes, you have to go as soon as you get to 0. We don't have the ability to stop the countdown, wait 5 minutes. Now all of a sudden the liquid oxygen starts warming up from 340 degrees below 0 in the ground system, and that changes how much performance you get carrying into orbit, and we don't want to cut into those margins. Now, if we had had something like a 4-hour window, which some communication satellites have, we could actually get down to almost 0, hold the count, detank the Falcon 9, wait a while, it takes us about an hour and a half, reload a whole new batch of cold liquid oxygen and fuel from the big storage tank that we've got there at pad 39A, and try to launch again. But in that case, you have to be able to launch, about an hour and a half or so later after you scrub. And in the case of the International Space Station, an hour and a half from now, it's nowhere near where we need to be to get to orbit with the performance of the Falcon 9 and the Dragon. So today, it's a combination. We start the day with a 1-second window.
Yeah, just informing you, it's
but
been
once
2
we
hours,
get inside of 35 minutes, it becomes an instantaneous window for the Falcon 9, regardless of what the customer may be able to give us. So there's a little explanation for folks who are wondering why we have such a tight window.
Okay,
right now, it looks like we are bringing the last bits of fuel off of the stage, and liquid oxygen is just about off of the stage. So things are clocking right along per the 40-minute timeline. Everything looks good, and we'll wait to hear that we're clear, and then when we get the call for Bob and Doug to go ahead and disarm launch escape system, and the crew access arm will watch come back out, center itself around the Dragon hatch, and then the ingress and open the hatch.
Thank you for the science lesson, John I.
Hey, no charge.
Much appreciated.
We did hear a quick call to the crew there. We should be just under 10 minutes away from that prop offload completing. It looks like we're just tracking
Stage 2
the
fuel
RP1
offload is complete.
And there we have the confirmation. Stage 2 offload's complete. And we should have now just the RP1, so that densified propellant, or the RP1 is kerosene. We should be under 10%, a little under 10 minutes until that's off. And then we'll step through those events we were discussing, where they'll be able to disarm the launch escape system, get the arm back out there, and Bob and Doug can begin to exit the Dragon spacecraft. Still skies in the background.
That is Florida, though. The weather is constantly changing over there, which is why we always high on it through every single launch that we have out there. Bob and Doug are patiently waiting. As you can see, a view of them on the Crew Dragon vehicle as they're waiting prop offload to complete. Second stage prop is complete. We are just waiting on first stage to complete.
Stage 1 box offload is complete. Waiting on stage 1 fuel in roughly 5 minutes or so.
And again, the launch escape system is still armed. We are waiting for a prop offload to complete before they disarm that, and they'll be able to egress from the Crew Dragon vehicle.
And we just heard we should be just under 5 minutes away from the load coming out of the Falcon 9 first stage. And then we'll see those events start to pick back up, and we'll see the crew arm swing back out. They've been in those seats for a couple hours. They typically get inside of Dragon a little over 2.5 hours ahead of launch. So they've been strapped into these seats for quite a while. System size though, so they're as comfortable and as snug as possible. Obviously, since they're going to be in them for a really long time, but most importantly, when you're doing the very end of the mission, it's your car seat, and splashing down or landing on land is not the most gentle of procedures in a capsule. So just really making sure that they're snug inside of that Dragon capsule. But we should be a little under 5 minutes away from the prop offload being completed.
And as Dan mentioned, those suits are custom made, but the seats are also custom fit for each astronaut as well. They do remain on Crew Dragon for this mission for almost 24 hours about. So we do want to make sure that they are comfortable and make sure that the suits and the seats are comfortable enough for them to stay in that position for a while. Into orbit, they are allowed to get out of their seats and get a little bit more comfortable, but it's a long ride for them.
If they do get on orbit, they are able to get out of the seats and actually out of their suits too, since for this flight path today, it was going to take them about 19 hours. Would actually have had about 8 hours to sleep on board the Dragon capsule. So we weren't able to launch today, though. The rendezvous on Saturday should be very similar to what we would have had if we launched today, where it'll take them about 19 hours to get to the International Space Station. They'll launch and they'll have a number of different events that we'll be able to walk you through, including manual piloting of Dragon and just really putting the spacecraft through all of the paces before it arrives at the International Space Station. Because again, this is a test flight, and this is this last test before we certify the Dragon spacecraft for regular crewed flights, which will just be bringing up those long duration, 6-month, maybe even a year-long missions.
Right. And it should be a very exciting test flight because it's pretty much like an actual mission. When Bob and Doug get on the station, they will be performing some research while they're up there and performing tests and doing some final things for this demonstration mission.
Yeah, but I mean, just for right now, we are just going to continue to stay with them until we see them come out of Dragon, because the launch escape system's still armed while we wait for this propellant offload to complete. That's just done as a safety measure. Anytime you have rocket propellants beneath you, you want to make sure that we have a good way for that of the way. And so we should be within just a couple of minutes for that final bit of RP1 coming off the first stage, and then we'll hear the crew get the go to disarm that launch escape system. We'll see the crew access arm swing back in. But if you're just tuning in, expecting them to be in space, we did have a scrub today due to weather. Our next launch attempt is going to be this Saturday, May 30th at 3:22 p.m. Eastern Time. And just like we did today, we're going to be bringing you every single step of the way. It's going to look a little familiar if you watched all of today's, but it's going to be just as exciting.
I can imagine it might be more exciting with all the anticipation that we've hyped this launch up for, with already going through it all today. But again, the more practice we have, the better off we will be. Hopefully next launch attempt we will have a flawless launch and actually be able to lift off with good weather.
Yeah, weather is going to be the big thing that we'll continue to watch. That was the culprit today for our scrub, and our initial weather reports already looking at about a 40% probability of violation. So as John and I was saying, the optimists in us have to say that's 60% good. So we're going to look at the good side of this, and that's roughly what we were leading up to this. We won't have a rogue tropical storm forming off of South Carolina on us on Saturday, but always be dynamic. So we'll just continue to track and hopefully get a good chance hit that window on Saturday.
And just a reminder, everything else on the vehicle and for the mission was looking good today. It was just the weather, which, as John I said earlier, and Lauren even referred to this, weather is the one thing that we actually cannot control on our missions. So unfortunately, it did cause us to scrub today. The vehicles are healthy. Bob and Doug were ready. And they should be ready to go again with the next launch attempt on Saturday.
Just looking at our data, it looks like that RP1 about all out. So we'll just kind of stand by for a few more moments. Hopefully we get that call soon, John I.
Yeah, I was going to, while we're waiting to hear the call, that the last percentage of fuel is off. I was going to comment on Jesse's discussion about it. I think during this countdown, there were more words said about the weather than everything else.
Uh-huh.
I'm listening right now, discussion in the background.
Yeah, and again, for people wondering if we knew that we did have bad weather, even from this morning, get to this all the way down all the way down to the final minutes of the countdown. And with Florida weather being pretty sporadic, even hurricanes coming through or bad weather coming through and passing 20 minutes later and having good weather for a launch. So we continued to attempt to launch today, but unfortunately 4T0 today, weather was not on our side.
Yeah, and Jesse, this is John again. I dropped off to listen to a weather discussion. They were just giving the times. The roll went green, so we could have gone without a lightning concern. The attached anvil rule cleared, but the field mill rule is clear at 58 minutes after the hour. So that's another 4.5 minutes from now. So we were cleared at about 25 minutes later launch time. It does remind me, at risk of people, but the old saying that says it's better to be on the ground wishing you were flying than flying wishing you were on the ground.
Yes, definitely. Safety first, always, and making sure that when Bob and Doug do fly, they are flying safely and planned. So again, this is standard procedure for us to make sure that they do have a safe flight to the International Space Station.
All right, well, for now, we're just continuing to stand by, expecting the call that all of that prop has now been offloaded. 9.
All right, venting vehicle tanks to nominal TPC set points for crew ingress.
At this moment, the launch escape system still armed. Once the prop offload is complete, that'll be the next step in our pursuit. Bob and Doug begin to make their way out of Dragon.
LD, count up. LD. We have the prompt here for nominal crew egress.
Okay, so we're ready for launch escape system disarm.
As affirmed, ready to disarm.
MD copies. You guys are ready? We'll.
Yeah, launch team's ready. Go ahead and advise the crew.
Hey, Dragon SpaceX, you copied that discussion. So with that, you are go for disarming launch escape system per section 2 of 5.100.
We'll put that in work. Section 2, disarming the launch escape system.
All right, that was the call we were waiting for, propelling off of Falcon 9. So Doug Hurley, Bob Ankin now going to disarm the system on Dragon. And once that's disarmed, those 8 Super Draco engines will be out of the mix.
SpaceX Dragon launch escape system is set to Alpha Decimal 3.
Copy that. We concur.
And showing then escape system has been disarmed.
And Dragon SpaceX, with that confirmation, you are go to open your visors and proceed to section 3.
Okay, we'll open the visors and go to section 3.
As you heard and you can see, Bob and Doug can now open their visors and get ready for exfil. Again, they kept their visors on while the launch escape system was armed, while prop offloading was continuing, and that is just to make sure that they are safe. Now that there is no more propellant on any of the vehicles, they are safe to have disarmed the launch escape system and now are getting ready for that crew arm to swing back, the hatch to open, and for them to egress.
SpaceX Dragon with an update. We're holding in 3.4 and we're ready for when you are.
Copy that. We'll wait for the closeout team to open the hatch and verify clearance, and then we can execute C rotation.
Dragon cap.
And there's that crew arm swinging back towards Dragon. Once that crew arm is in place, they will be able to open the hatch on Crew Dragon. Bob and Doug's seats will rotate back out of launch position so that they can safely get out of their seats and egress the vehicle.
And we heard they'll have what they call nominal egress, so just the normal procedures for getting them out of the capsule. That means the closeout team that was there to get them in will be able to assist as they come out. They'll arrive and get that hatch open, and then they'll be able to rotate the seats. That'll rotate pretty much forward, where they'll be in the original position that the seats were configured when they made their way into Dragon. It just gets them a little in under the displays and makes getting in and out of the capsule a little bit easier. They've been in those seats for about 3 hours at this point, so definitely a long day for the crew. As they woke up about 6 hours prior to our T-minus 0, had their breakfast, which we confirmed was steak and eggs early, and then they proceeded through all of the suit up and the trip to the pad, making their way inside Dragon, where they've been for about the last 3 hours. We were on track for an on-time liftoff right at 4:33 p.m. Eastern Time, but did have to scrub a little under 17 minutes before launch. So for now, we've offloaded all of the propellant off of Falcon 9. The launch escape system has been disarmed. That crew access arm is back right up next to Dragon, as you can see in that view on the left. Pretty soon we'll see the teams arrive to get the hatch.
Head up to the space station that they are fully healthy. So this, again, is standard procedure, not just because of this pandemic that's going on. Standard procedure for astronauts to quarantine prior to heading to the station. And as Dan mentioned, this is a standard procedure to exit the vehicle as well. We did scrub today, but this is not an emergency state. This is standard. This is something that is practiced and rehearsed and made sure that we do follow our standard procedures to make sure that everything is still safe. Bob and Doug exit safely and go back into quarantine and get ready for our next launch attempt.
Looks like they're getting a chance to show.
Yeah.
Dan, Jesse, I'm monitoring along in the scrub procedure right now. They're getting the goes to get the folks back to the pad, the crew that'll open the hatch. So they have notified the team chief, launch engineering, to return to the pad. As around the pad, the Air Force and NASA set up roadblocks to make sure nobody gets into the hazard area. So they will head to the roadblocks. They'll pull them open so that they can drive to the pad. So launch director, I think, is estimating it's still about 15 minutes for the crew to drive all the way down to 39A, get up the tower, and then begin operations on the hatch. They have confirmed that the purge of the Dragon service section, which is nitrogen during the countdown, to avoid an oxygen leak, that is back on air now. His arm is on air, so they're ready for the egress team to get up into the tower, but it's going to take them a little bit still, I think, to drive down the road in the vehicles and go up the elevator.
Bir iskelet doktora gitmiş. Doktor artık çok geç demiş.
Per a normal stroke countdown. We have had the opportunity to practice with the crew in, for example, the dry dress rehearsal last Saturday, after we had done the static fire of the Falcon 9 the day before.
I've been seeing a few questions, people asking why aren't we just trying tomorrow? As John and I was talking us through, there's some very specific times you have to identify when you're going to be able to link up with the International Space Station. You'll only have so much fuel, which can only generate so much energy to make sure you're going to intersect with the station, which is flying at over 17,000 miles an hour. So you're hitting
Dragon
one bullet
SpaceX.
with... some of our other launch attempts are able to make it to station, but have much longer
Dragon,
times.
to prevent us from losing comms, we're going to be switching to umbilical at this time. I'm going to be unmerging Countdown 1, but we'll keep you updated here on Dragon Ground.
Okay, yeah, we see the Cedrus, and with a little over 3 minutes, we'll stand by for your next call on umbilical.
Copy.
the crew getting a call. They're just going to reconfigure some communications. But as to why we're not launching, say, tomorrow...
And core and countdown 1 loops are merged.
But when we pick our launch attempts, we also have to take in mind some of the human factors of these attempts. Some of these other launch attempts may exist, but it would require
SpaceX Dragon loud and clear on umbilical.
Copy, heavy the same.
still getting good comm between the crew and the core here in Hawthorne. But really, just to sum it up, we pick our launch attempts, not just can we make it to the station, but just how long is it going to take to get there. And that's why Saturday is going to be our best option at 3:22 p.m. Eastern Time for our next attempt. A little over 20 hours until we actually arrive at the space station, if we're able to get off the ground on Saturday.
And this gives Bob and Doug, a few days to kind of shake off the nerves from today's launch attempt, give them some more time to rest, ready for our launch attempt on Saturday. And if you're just now joining us, we did scrub our Demonstration 2 mission today. This team to make it back to the launch pad, up the tower, and help the crew, or help Bob and Doug egress the vehicle.
Dragon SpaceX for closeout team status.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the closeout team has arrived at the pad and they are heading to the White Room.
Copy that.
You heard that call out. The egress team is at the pad and are proceeding to Doug in the White Room, where they can open the hatch and help them exit the vehicle.
Yep, and we'll continue to stick with Bob and Doug until we see that hatch get open and them start to make their way out. And then they're going to get some views once more back at the pad. You can see that egress team moving back in. They were wearing the black clean suits that we saw as they were helping Bob and Doug get into the Dragon just several hours ago. They're now going to get on the elevator, make their way back up, down the crew access arm, and then we'll get that Dragon.
And as we saw earlier, this is a very tall structure, but that elevator is pretty quick there. So we saw them enter the bottom of the tower. It should be a very short time before they make it to the top and are able to get to the White Room and open.
If you want.
And it should just be a few more moments. We'll see that closeout team make their way back into the crew access arm and down the hatchway. And again, if you are just now tuned scrub, just about a little under 17 minutes. At launch time, it's going to be another instantaneous launch time. It's going to be 3:22 p.m. Eastern time over there in Florida. And assuming an on-time launch, it'll be a pretty similar flight looking at today, where it'll be roughly about 19 hours before they make that initial contact to the International Space Station. They'll get on orbit and execute a series of 5 different burns to gradually raise their orbit until they're just a few hundred meters below the station and maybe a few kilometers behind, and then they'll do all of the final maneuvers. And by that point, the team here in Hawthorne will be working very closely with the team down in Houston in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Weather for Saturday still not ideal, but it's roughly what we started out with today, where we have about a 40% chance, possibility of violation, and it'll be tracking a lot of the same issues with cumulus clouds and potential precipitation. We'll also be keeping an eye on all of the down. Oh, it looks like we're seeing some people start to make their way into the crew access arm now, so we should see them get that Dragon side hatch open in just a few minutes. But as a reminder, we'll be looking at weather around the launch pad and weather downrange in their flight path on the way to orbit, and that's always checked just in case they have to do any kind of emergency maneuver and land down in the Atlantic Ocean. We will be making sure that the weather is at acceptable levels all the way until there. So you can see the team coming down now. Should see the hatch open momentarily, and then we can begin to get Bob and Doug out of the draft.
And again, we are staying live until Bob and Doug are safely out of Crew Dragon. You can see on your left-hand screen the team getting ready to open the hatch for them and help them out of their seats.
And at this point, the launch escape system has been disarmed. That was done after we successfully offloaded all of the propellants from the first and second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. There are propellants loaded into Dragon, so the team's doing what we call kind of a sniff test, so using a portable detector just to assess the atmosphere around the Dragon capsule itself before they get the hatch open and bring Bob and Doug out.
All of this is standard safety procedures for egressing the vehicle. This is to ensure the safety of the crew, as well as Bob and Doug.
Dragon, SpaceX for status.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the closeout team is at the White Room. They are configuring the crew arm for egress, expected to take minutes.
Okay, 10 minutes. Thank you.
It should be just about 10 minutes. As a reminder, they're in the White Room. We walked through that a little bit earlier in our coverage this morning. The White Room name simply because of its color, and that's something that started all the way back during earlier Gemini missions. And that is literally the last place where astronauts are standing before they get loaded into this vehicle. It has an environmental control apparatus and a seal that it can put right up against the Dragon spacecraft just to keep all of that dust, dirt, and Florida humidity
And Dragon
out of the
SpaceX,
capsule.
we're right rotation. I just wanted to check in with you on comfort levels.
I'd say no changes, Jay. It hasn't been too bad at all.
Copy all.
And obviously at this point, with the launch escape system disarmed, with straps and gotten our feet out of the straps on the bottom of the seat, so it's a little more comfortable anyway.
Copy all. Looks comfortable.
Right now, the closeout team just going to take a couple of minutes to configure the white room. They'll set up a seal between it and the Dragon spacecraft just to make sure we're not letting anything from the surrounding environment get into that craft, which is kept very pristine, obviously, for the crew members once they're inside. They have a small bridge that just connects the crew arm to the capsule itself, just making sure they have a nice clear path for their entrance and exit. So it should just be a few more minutes. We'll see that hatch get opened, and then our crew members can start to make their way out. And you heard seat rotation. They rotate the seats prior to their actual flight to where they're a little bit more parallel to the ground directly in front of those displays. We'll see them rotate down, just giving them easy access to get out of the capsule.
And as Dan mentioned, we want to keep FOD out of the capsule. FOD is foreign object debris, so that's basically anything that does not belong inside of the vehicle. So not just like dirt and dust, but just anything that was not meant to be inside of there should not be there. So we are doing everything as a standard procedure to make sure that we do keep FOD out, especially since this is be another attempt and another opportunity for FOD to enter the vehicle. As they're exiting, we still make that we keep everything basically like a clean room.
Dragon SpaceX, you may hear some vehicle venting in about 20 seconds.
Copy.
John Isberger here with the webcast desk in Hawthorne, California. We are continuing to wait for the crew to open the side hatch. We've got the cameras, astronauts Doug Hurley, Bob Benkin inside. Visors are up. They've gotten their feet out of the restraints. Gloves are off in case of Doug, it looks like. And the team is just outside the hatch. They're going through the sequence right now. Make sure all good. Make sure there are no concerns with gases, be it the propellants of the vehicle. Case of Doug, it looks like. And the team is just outside the hatch. They're going through the sequence right now. Make sure all good. No concerns with gases, and be it the propellants of the vehicle. Case of Doug. Countdown. I had a lot of fun saying there were no issues on Falcon 9 or Dragon of a technical sort. The range was ready to support. The downrange weather looked good in case Dragon had to make a unplanned abort splashdown in an escape maneuver somewhere in the. We even had the once we get on orbit, in case Dragon had to re-enter and come back early, the weather was good in the Pacific in case it had to come down. So everything was looking our way, except an escape maneuver somewhere in the. We even had the once we get on orbit, in case Dragon had to re-enter and come back. The weather was good in the Pacific in case it had to come down. So everything was looking our way, except an escape maneuver, meaning where the range says conditions are clear and you are all right to launch. We were still red on those rules, and that was the countdown for the day. Again, we scrubbed at T-minus 16 minutes, 54 seconds. That was shortly before we were due to begin loading the liquid oxygen onto the second stage. That was both the logical breakpoint in the countdown procedure. Again, we scrubbed at T-minus 6 seconds. That was shortly before we were due to begin loading crew can verify that there is nothing in the way under the seats that Doug and Bob are sitting in, and we will get the seat rotation again, get them back a little bit more vertical. They're more on their backs right now in the launch, so they'll rotate, then they'll help them out of the seats, and they'll come back out and down the arm and off of the tower.
Some folks outside the window.
Where we stand on today's countdown, with our readiness to proceed into another countdown attempt. But currently at Kennedy Space Center at historic Pad 39A, we're getting ready for the hatch opening and the crew to be able to leave Dragon, come back down, get out of their suits, and wait to go another day, the 30th.
And Dragon SpaceX, sure you see vehicles in pad hatch open. The AVVs are now open, and that.
Yep, we felt it and heard it, and copy all.
And Dragon SpaceX for status, the closeout team is stepping into hatch opening now.
Copy.
John Innsbrucker back here at the webcast desk in Hawthorne, California. We've got another camera up, and you can see the side-by-side view on the monitor. Astronauts Bob and Doug inside, waiting for the hatch to come open. We're still in the middle of a equalization step. Make sure that pressure inside the Dragon is equal to the ambient pressure, so that when we open the hatch, it just comes open without any extra force. You can also see the SpaceX team is up alongside the capsule. They are removing essentially the thermal protection devices. If you have a door handle on your automobile, if you're going to have to re-enter from outer space, you're going to have to put a small heat shield over that door handle. Otherwise, any kind of protuberances, cavities could be subject to burn up. So they have to take their time, make sure that we get all of the protection safety devices off, so that they can then get access to the mechanism to go ahead and bring the hatch open. So what you are watching right now on the left monitor is the egress team going through the steps. This is typical. We're not here over the pad net if they're having any problems. They just take their time and make sure that everybody's ready to bring the hatch open when they finally get there. So currently we are T plus 1 hour and 11 minutes or so since the planned launch. Obviously still on the ground as we're going through the post-scrub operations to bring astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken out of the capsule. And you can see now hatch is coming open. There's a view from the camera inside the capsule. You can see the hatch area. Crew gave a quick wave to the ground crew when it came open. And right now they should be inspecting the area so that we can command the seats to rotate back into the ingress-egress position, make it a little easier on Bob and Doug to get in and out of the seats.
Dragon SpaceX, just for awareness, they have a few more steps in their procedure, and they should be calling to us for seat rotation shortly.
Okay, copy that. Yep, we see them working on that, and just as a lead into that, we are ready for the seat rotation. So just let us know when you're ready to start.
We'll go.
We have the confirmation from the Dragon team that they are just about ready to send the seat rotation command. Again, the ground crew is verifying, making sure that none of the cargo that's packed in Dragon underneath the crew, nothing is in the way, nothing came loose. Row of crew seating, but there is, as we've mentioned before, Dragon's designed to carry up to 7. But on this flight, for example, much of the cargo that we're carrying is loaded in various areas down below where the astronauts are seated. So they're just verifying nothing's in the way. Send the rotation command, the seats will pivot without encumbrance.
Dragon SpaceX, we are initiating.
Dragon copies, we're ready.
That call out from the Dragon core up to the crew, letting them know that we are sending commands from the ground to rotate the seats, and you can see astronauts Doug Hurley, Bob Behnken rotating in their seat back to a more comfortable position to get in and out of.
Dragon SpaceX, seats are upright. Thanks for the valiant effort today, helping us test our scrub timeline, and we'll see you Saturday.
Yeah, we appreciate those words every day. It was a great practice, and we'll do it again on Saturday. Everybody stay safe, and we'll talk to you on the loops.
Likewise.
Well, Dan, we've heard it is open. The ground crew is going to work to get the astronauts out. The SpaceX Dragon team, like the SpaceX Falcon 9 team, is going to be coming off of console now as we turn it over to the folks on the pad. So while we didn't launch, get down and scrub sequence. So we've got that good lesson learned under our belt. We look forward to Saturday having even better results when we get close to T0.
That's right. Always great when we don't have any issues with the capsule or the rocket, which we didn't today. Just had to fight that weather. And we are looking at about a 50% probability of violation. That's about where we were today. We did see it was all just a matter of trying to line up correctly. And didn't make it today, but we're going to try again on Saturday.
Right, and it sounds like we were just about half an hour away from making the launch attempt today with weather, 50% weather chance on Saturday. Hopefully we have a better day at T0 for liftoff.
But we're definitely going to all be back. Jesse, myself, and John I will be here in Hawthorne to take you along every step of the way. We hope everyone else tunes in also, because this is really going to be towards Saturday for America once again launching U.S. astronauts on American rockets from American soil. With them getting out of the capsule, though, that's going to do it for us here at Hawthorne. We're going to send you back down to Florida for one last check-in with our teams there. So over to you, Marie, Lauren, still sticking around, and we're going to be looking forward to Saturday.
All right, thanks a lot, Dan. Yeah, we're just all sitting here. We watched Bob Behnken just climb out of his seat. Looks like he is out of Crew Dragon now, and Doug Hurley following suit. No pun intended. And there we see Bob in the foreground and Doug climbing out of Crew Dragon in the background. Looks like helping them out. So any minute they're going to be basically just coming back the way from whence they came. Leland, I know you had a scrub years back.
Yeah, Marie, in 2008, we were having breakfast. I never scrubbed while I was in the vehicle, but we were having breakfast, and we got a call from the flight director saying that two of these engine cutoff sensors that were bad. Two were bad, and the flight rules say that you should have to have 3 of 4 to fly. And so we all said we're not going to fly unless we have them. And I think we all need to know that the flight rules are there to protect, our astronauts and their families. And we sometimes get that launch fever that we want to go ahead and just try it anyway. But we have these rules for a reason, and it's really important to stick to the rules, even in the heat of battle, even with dignitaries here. It's just the way that we have to do it as operators.
It's also a good went through, exercised all the systems nearly to T0, which is incredible. I believe this may have been the first time Bob and Doug are sitting on top of in our vehicle with a fueled rocket. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Closing the hatch, exercising the environmental life support systems, doing that flight leak check. I mean, all of this is a ton of learning that came out of here. Even if we didn't
Absolutely. So we're getting a cool view that we wouldn't have seen if they'd launched. They're making their way back down the crew access arm. And they are going to be turning the corner there, heading to the stairs that are going to take them down to the elevator.
Passing the worm.
Passing the worm. So, yep, they're heading down this. That's going to take them down to the 255-foot level, and then they're going to be getting in the elevator, take them down to the ground level. And we'll do it again on Saturday.
It's actually very reassuring. All systems were go. You know, there was no problems with the vehicle at all, as Lauren, as you said, and it was just some weather. And I think if we have that same performance on Saturday, and the weather gods give us some good juju there, we'll be good to go.
Yes, yes, please. We were so close today. It hurt my heart. If we had 10 more minutes, it sounded like we probably would have made it, but just was not to be today. And of course, we're going to always do what is the safest thing for the crew. And as they head into the elevator there, we do want to go over to now where the NASA administrator, Jim Bridenstine, is standing by. He would like to provide his own thoughts now. We'll go to him.
Well, thank you, Marie. I know there's a lot of disappointment today. The weather got us. But I also want to say it was a great day for NASA. It was a great day for space. I think our teams worked together in a really impressive way, making good decisions all along. So here in this particular case, we had just simply too much electricity in the atmosphere. There wasn't really a lightning storm or anything like that, but there was a concern that if we did launch, bigger lightning. And so we made the right decision. We had the parameters set ahead of time. The teams worked together, and in the end, the right decision was made. I will tell you, I've done a lot of interviews over the last 2 days, and in those interviews, I get asked over and over again, is there undue pressure? Say to me, with all of the attention of the world on this launch, with all of the VIPs coming, are you going to feel pressure on this launch? And I will tell you, as I've told our teams, under no circumstances should anybody feel pressure. If we are not ready to go, we simply, and I will tell you, I am proud, so proud of our teams working together to make the right decision in this particular case. We have a lot to look forward to in just a few short days. On Saturday afternoon, we're going to do it again. Here's what we know. We are going to launch American astronauts on American rockets from American soil. We're going to do that. We're very close. I also want to say that this was an important milestone just today, a wet dress rehearsal. We haven't done a wet dress rehearsal with our astronauts full gear before. We've done a dry dress rehearsal. Now we've done a wet dress. So we learn a lot every time we do these things. This is no different. And we get a lot of great data from doing what we just did. So good day for NASA. It was a good day for SpaceX. And we've got a lot to look forward to. So I want to say congratulations to both of the teams, and let's go get this done. I know we're up for it. Saturday is going to be a great day, and here we go again. So thank you to everybody for all the great work. Marie, back to you.
All right, thank you so much. Those were some great insights from Jim Bridenstine, the NASA administrator. The crew's making their way back to astronaut crew quarters, where they're going to remain until Saturday. They've been in quarantine for 2 weeks, and there they will stay to keep them safe and healthy for our next launch attempt. Again, we had to stand down from launch today because of unfavorable weather conditions around Launch Complex 39A, but we're going to be ready to do this again Saturday, May 30th. The new launch time will be 3:22 p.m. And our coverage will begin live here on NASA TV at 11 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time, Saturday. So be sure to tune back in on NASA television and nasa.gov/live if you're watching along online. And we will be back here to take you through it every step of the way with us, and we will see you back here Saturday.
Sıradaki şarkı ING'li olan, olmayan herkes için geliyor.
Kredi, şubeye gitmeden olmaz mı ki? Kesen zahmet etme, bunun mobili var, dijitali. Kredi çekmek için şubeye koşma. Cepte kredi, cepte kredi, cepte. İNG'de cepte kredi, cepte kredi, cepte. Gir mobile.
Hemen ING Mobil veya ing.com.tr'ye girin. %0.79'dan başlayan faiz oranlarıyla kredinize hemen başvurun.
And liftoff of Endeavour. Since the Space Shuttle's retirement in 2011, the United States hasn't had the capability to transport crew to orbit. Instead, we've been relying on the Russian Soyuz for almost a decade, while we rush to develop alternatives. The commercial crew providers are now on the verge of completing development of the two crewed low Earth orbit spaceships, Crew Dragon and the Boeing CST-100 liner, and today we'll be comparing them head to head. And this episode is sponsored by me. I need more.space/shop. If you want to help support me doing more of this type of storytelling, just pick up a shirt. A lot, and I do try really hard to make shirt designs that I think people would like to wear around. So if you want to support more episodes like this, please consider buying a shirt from ineedmore.space/shop. Back to the episode. After the Constellation program, NASA's replacement collapsed because of a variety of reasons. The United States crewed exploration program was left with the SLS and the commercial crew program. It also has a service module. A sheet of static solar panels are mounted at the base to power the spacecraft's electronic subsystems. It has a lot of thrusters on the Aerojet rocket duct, including 20 OMV thrusters, which are used for supporting orbital maneuvers and attitude control in case of a low altitude port, and 28 RCS thrusters for maneuvering and providing reboosts to the international. It also includes the pusher-style launch abort system, or LAS, powered by the 4 RS-88 Bantam engines. They use hydrazine, a hypergolic propellant, and although it is admittedly very toxic, it ensures an instant startup from the engines that carry the capsule to safety in case of an anomaly during the launch. The tanks carrying the hydrazine and hydrogen tetroxide are also present within the service module. The service module is attached during the entire course of the spacecraft's mission and separated just before re-entry, exposing the crew module's heat shield. It then burns up in the Earth's atmosphere and is expended with every flight. Starliner's landing sequence begins with the deorbit burn and re-entry. After slowing down because of the atmospheric drag while being stabilized by the onboard thrusters, it deploys its drogue parachutes and ejects the heat shield before landing, exposing the airbags. The main parachutes deploy, slowing it down further, and the airbags inflate to provide a soft touchdown on the sandy desert expanse of the U.S. Army's White Sands Missile Range.
2.
Yakında gelecek bambaşka bir yaz. Dışarı çıka küçük büyük her yaş. Her kalpte bir hayal var bembeyaz. En tatlı anılara hazırız bu yaz. Nasıl da koşuşuruz bahçelerde, şahane tatlı gecelerde. Sen bana, ben sana komşu evlerde. Kök sarmaşıklar gibi sarılsak bu yaz.
Elbet bu günler bitecek, bir gün hepimiz için yaz gelecek. Hasretiyle, renkleriyle, tadıyla bu yaz bambaşka geçecek. Golf dondurma.
Launch.
Now let's look at SpaceX's capsule. By 2010, SpaceX had developed the uncrewed Dragon capsule for cargo transport space station under NASA's CRS contract. This had been an extremely critical as well as lucrative deal for SpaceX and allowed them to fund the rest of their development. The next logical step was to scale this proven design for an Earth orbit capsule that can safely deliver and return cargo in a crewed transportation vehicle for NASA's Commercial Crew program. The initial prototypes of the capsule were simply the Dragon 1 design with added thruster pods for the launch abort system. This, however, was not the final design. On the 30th of May 2014, Elon unveiled the Dragon 2 capsule, also known as Crew Dragon, and it went something like this. The capsule was a sleek black and white pod that looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. A lot like this. Now, spacious and uncramped. The seats were minimalistic. 4 massive touchscreens folded down from the top, with all of the controls available and telemetry presented in neat animations. It was a 21st century spaceship, but it wasn't just a facelift. SpaceX, in their typical fashion, had done something entirely insane with their new project. The thruster pods wouldn't just provide an abort mode of propulsively landing the capsule anywhere on the planet and beyond with considerable precision. New engines called the Super Dracos were under development, powered by hydrazine and completely 3D printed out of Inconel. 8 of these highly throttleable hypergolic engines would enable the powered descent and landing. The control surfaces of Dragon 2 are largely touchscreen with... Now, there are many benefits to this design. For instance, as the operations of Crew Dragon evolve, they can do updates to control interfaces by just a software patch, rather than physically reconfiguring switches and dials, adding cost and complications. The drawback, well, for now at least, is largely using unproven technology and touchscreens for essential spaceflight functions. But I'm sure that's something that will be part of spaceflight's future. I'm not worried. SpaceX is planning to use the Dragon 2/Crew Dragon variant for a mission to the Martian surface. They called it the Red Dragon capsule will be launched on a Falcon Heavy into a trans-Mars injection trajectory. It would then aerobrake into Mars's atmosphere and land propulsively. It would carry experiments, payloads, or even rovers to preemptively scout mission sites in the future. However, things changed drastically for Dragon's future. The landing legs that popped out of the heat shield proved to be difficult to qualify for NASA's crews. They weren't massive fans of the propulsive landing method either, and preferred traditional parachutes as the primary landing method. SpaceX had been counting NASA's support for Red Dragon development and possibly contracts for lander missions. Without any prospects of landing Dragons on Earth or Mars, SpaceX stopped development for the propulsive landing technology for it. Instead, they decided to accelerate development on their larger next-gen Martian rocket, which eventually became Starship. Dragon would now use parachute systems to land. The Super Draco engine would simply be used now as the abort engines. The capsule would splash down in the ocean like the older Gemini and Apollo capsules. And unlike the Starliner, it won't be reused for crewed spaceflight. However, it will still be modified to be used for the CRS-2 contract and replace the existing Dragon 1 fleet. You might also notice something that looks very much like a service module on your Dragon, but in fact it is not. It's called the trunk, and it really has four main jobs, being to hold the solar panels, the second to hold the radiators that help keep the spacecraft cool, the third being the place that the winglets are mounted to in the event of a launch abort scenario, and the fourth, and which is my opinion one of the most fascinating aspects of it, is an unpressurized cargo hold, very much like what the space shuttle had, which allows Crew Dragon to bring supplies, exterior modules, or experiments to the space station that would be accessed via the Canada arm. An American flag was flown on the very first space shuttle mission, STS-1, on the orbiter Columbia in April 1981. When Atlantis flew the final shuttle mission, STS-135, in July of 2011 to the International Space Station its fleet helped build, it carried the same flag and left it on board. The next crew to fly to the ISS from American soil would retrieve this flag and return it to Earth as a symbolic gesture. This has fueled a race between the two companies to get to the ISS first, a capture the flag if you will. This race, however, has been characterized by a ton of unexpected development challenges for both the providers. In July 2018, Boeing Starliner and its abort systems when the hypergolic propellant began leaking from the spacecraft because of a series of faulty valves. This was a critical issue and delayed the orbital test flight by more than a year. During the pad abort test early in 2019, one of the three main parachutes just failed to deploy. This was a cause for concern, but the test was still declared as a success. However, the anomaly that occurred during its orbital flight test is quite a serious setback. The capsule was launched into a lower orbital trajectory instead of a stable orbit so that the crew can easily deorbit using the onboard thrusters, rather than having to be stuck in orbit. After separation, the capsule was supposed to perform a series of orbit-raising burns to get it to the ISS and rendezvous. The cap, portrayed as Atlas's daughter in Greek mythology, lifted off on top of United Launch Alliance's Atlas V rocket in a new N22 configuration, which performed nominally. N22 meaning N for no fairing, 2 solid rocket motors, and 2 Centaur upper stage engines. After a successful separation, however, it began firing its thrusters quite a bit, leading to a rapid fuel consumption. A subsequent investigation revealed that the capsule's onboard computers had picked up the wrong mission elapsed time from the Atlas, and as a result, its clock was delayed by 11 hours. It thought that it was in the middle of performing an orbit-raising burn even though the main engines weren't firing, and began using its thrusters to keep the capsule stable in between 2 tracking and data relay satellites, which meant it could not receive its commands from the ground. When controllers finally regained communication with Starliner, it had lost way too much fuel. It wouldn't be able to reach the ISS, and docking was in an off-nominal orbit with weird parameters, and was eventually deorbited and brought back down to Earth. The re-entry and landing was successful. Now this was an embarrassing flaw for a craft that cost billions to develop. However, Boeing was eager to test the capsule out on its crewed flight. Now SpaceX has had its own share of problems with abort systems and parachutes. Now once the propulsive landing program was canceled, parachutes became the mode. However, a test in 2019 had shown undesirable results, and so the parachutes had to undergo a redesign, and NASA required 13 drop tests to qualify them. Now the orbital flight test for SpaceX had gone perfectly. The capsule launched perfectly on a Falcon 9 Block 5, docked with the ISS, had a massively successful series of live streams featuring an absolutely adorable, and returned its passenger, a test dummy called Ripley, wearing a SpaceX suit, safely to Earth. However, the most concerning failure came after this. The DM-1 capsule from this mission was undergoing some thruster tests at Cape Canaveral. Then, it suddenly exploded. A red nitrous plume of nitrous billowed into the sky and could be seen from all around. A video of the incident leaked, showing the capsule get ripped apart from an internal explosion, making it a very sensational and public failure. An investigation began, looking for the probable cause, and after a few months, it was revealed that it had very specific source. Turns out the video wasn't the only thing that had leaked. A faulty check valve allowed some nitrogen tetroxide to flow the wrong way and form a slug of sorts. When the system was pressurized with the helium prior to ignition, the slug was accelerated straight into the titanium valve, damaging it and igniting it, which led to the explosive failure. The valve has since been replaced with a burst disc, and the system has since been verified by the in-flight abort test, which was awesome. Now let's note that $2.6 billion to develop Crew Dragon, while Boeing received $4.2 billion to develop Starliner. Now Boeing defended this by saying that SpaceX had already flying cargo capsule that they were just modifying into a crewed version while they had to start from scratch. Now SpaceX had chosen to perform additions, while Boeing's route involved more simulations and paperwork for qualifying onboard systems. This represents a fundamental distinction, possibly the effects are reflected in their failures. If Boeing had performed more real-world testing, a simulation errors such as a clock may have been avoided. Similarly, if SpaceX had spent a little bit more time qualifying their parts, they would have noticed that putting titanium near nitrogen tetroxide isn't the best idea, and is a known failure mode that has affected spacecraft in the past. Oh, and if you're flying on Dragon, you get to wear this, and if you're flying on Starliner, you get to wear this. So now that we've gone over both spacecraft, let's go over some of their technical specs that you'll probably find interesting. The SpaceX Crew Dragon has the ability to carry 7 astronauts to low Earth orbit, but NASA's opting for 4 or even 3 seats to the International Space Station because they want more room for pressurized cargo. It can survive on its own in low Earth orbit for 1 week, or 210 days docked to the International Space Station. It can carry 6,000 kilograms or 13,000 pounds to orbit, as well as bring 3,000 kilograms or 6,600 pounds back. It can have up to 1,300 cubic feet of unpressurized space with the extended trunk. That is a lot more opportunity to carry cargo. Boeing Starliner has some very similar attributes to the SpaceX Crew Dragon. For free flight, it can survive up to 60 hours in low Earth orbit. Not as long as Crew Dragon, but still a few days, plenty of time to get to the International Space Station or any other point in low Earth orbit. Once docked to the space station, it can stay up there for 210 days because it enters a passive mode. It can also carry up to 7 crew members, with NASA also again doing 3 or 4 crew members to the International Space Station, taking that extra space for cargo. And it has no uncompressed storage area. The crewed flight tests for both of these capsules are coming up soon. The US will have its own crewed space flight capability again, opening up many more possibilities for missions. Apart from the missions to the ISS, we may be seeing them being used for a variety of... Maybe foreign governments will be interested in buying seats for their crews to low Earth orbit. Maybe there will be transport researchers or tourists or engineers to private space. Maybe we will see them being used to transport crew to cyclers heading to the moon or even Mars. So, who knows? I'm just excited to see crews launching from Cape Canaveral on American spaceships again. So, what do you think about the commercial crew program? Who do you think has a better chance of reaching the International Space Station first? Dragon or Starliner? Wait, Boeing's got to do what? Okay. Well, this is what happens when you film a video a month before it goes out. Turns out, Boeing needs to read 1 million lines of their software to recertify their spacecraft for, human or crewed space flight. And that's likely going to push back first crewed launch in probably about a year. So I think it's pretty safe to say SpaceX is going to win the capture the flag competition. But this is actually a really good teachable moment we can talk about right now. This is one of the reasons why NASA wanted multiple providers for the commercial crew program for events like this. If you look back to the Columbia and the Challenger accidents, when the space shuttle was down, it basically just shut down the entire human space operations for NASA. That's because they had one launch vehicle. One of the things NASA and their international partners learned from the space shuttle is that you need multiple options for access to space, which is why it's been so valuable to have the Cygnus resupply craft, the SpaceX Cargo Dragon, the Russian Progress vehicle, and the Japanese vehicle, which escapes my memory, but regardless, you need multiple options for access to space, and the same thing needs to be for crew. And NASA was hoping that you know, if the event that something happened on a Boeing spacecraft, they still have a SpaceX spacecraft to still be able to access station on a regular basis, and vice versa. God forbid something happened with the SpaceX Crew Dragon, they still had Starliner to lean on, as well as the Russian Soyuz. So you'd go from one way to access the station with human crews to three. So now we're missing Starliner. It's going to take a while, and Boeing, their mistake. But I was going to put a poll about which one do you think is going to win the space station or when they capture the flag, but I think we know who's going to win that race. But I still have hope for Boeing. And anyways, let's get back to the episode. Let me know in the poll above. Now let's have a discussion in the comments about the commercial crewed space flight and if you think it's the right way for missions to go farther into space. Do you think NASA made the right choices all those years ago, or do you still miss the shuttle? Lots. If you want to learn more about space history and just see cool space stuff, feel free to follow me on Twitter. I'm at TJ_Cooney. And please feel free to subscribe and just follow me on my space storytelling journey here on I Need More Space. I can't wait to see what's coming ahead. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Ground gas closeout is complete.
Go for launch.
Stage 2 is pressing for flight.
T-minus 30 seconds.
Stage 1 pressing for flight.
T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 0. Ignition, liftoff.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Stage 1 throttle bucket.
For those of you just joining us, you are watching a live view of the Falcon 9 rocket as it ascends through the atmosphere carrying the SpaceX Dragon 2 capsule to
Vehicle
orbit.
is supersonic.
The vehicle just passed through max Q, which is the point of maximum aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. As you can hear in the background, the excitement at SpaceX headquarters is unbelievable here.
Stage 1 throttle.
Vehicle is passing through max Q.
You heard that call out from max Q on the nets. The Falcon 9 actually throttles down its 9 Merlin engines to reduce aerodynamic loads on the vehicle. It is now throttling those engines back up. Coming up at T plus 2 minutes and 35 seconds is going to be 3 events in quick succession. The first one is going to be the main engine cutoff, or MECO. That's when the 9 Merlin 1D engines that you can see on your screen right now will...